Thank you for the opportunity for us to present our strategic marketing plan to you this evening. My name's Grant and I've got the pleasure of introducing my fellow team members, Josh and Nancy. My task this evening is to take you through the external analysis and I'm going the wrong way. Okay. I'll take you through the external analysis and then Josh will complete that before handing over to Nancy, who will explain some key insights that our investigation has uncovered before taking us through the recommendations. I will then conclude with our final insights and future recommendations. The purpose of our strategic marketing plan is to assist the government in enabling the most efficient, cost-effective and widespread adoption of the procurement legislation. The ultimate objective is to improve the built environment so that the environmental, economic and social outcomes are enhanced. In developing our solution, we've taken a double diamond design thinking approach, and this of course commences with the discovery phase. In adopting this approach, we've conducted a PESTLE and 5 forces analysis, completed a product lifestyle and adoption curve, undertaken interviews with key stakeholders, and completed some journey and perceptual maps. The objective here is to understand the environment and to identify the key higher order motives that the stakeholders have that are relevant to the implementation of the procurement legislation. Ultimately, the success of any enterprise or undertaking depends on understanding the dynamics of the environment it operates in and being able to adapt to it. To assist us in this regard, we've completed a PESTLE analysis, and what this reveals for us is that there's a significant demand from a social, cultural and an natural environment perspective for the outcomes sought by the procurement legislation. However, these two driving forces alone aren't sufficient to achieve those outcomes and are highly reliant on the legal aspect of the procurement legislation to begin the change in behaviour needed to achieve those outcomes. Accordingly, the biggest threat associated with the successful outcome here is the political will to retain that legislation. And as we heard a little bit earlier, that is somewhat tenuous. Not only is the legal backing an essential part of achieving the outcome sought, it also requires an enabling solution to deliver that in a cost-effective, timely and widespread manner. Private enterprise has done considerable work in developing a solution that will enable the legislation in the form of a digital registry. However, the digital registry also has to be successful for the legislation to be successful, and that requires an understanding of the drivers of the industry profitability. To this end, we can see that there's a significant threat of new entry into this industry, and that will drive a need for this digital registry to establish significant first mover advantage to become the predominant provider in order to ensure the industry doesn't become fragmented and collapses. To further understand the challenge faced by government, we've also completed a product lifestyle and adoption curve. And you can see by this the procurement legislation and the digital registry are both new to the market. They're serving the construction industry, which is in its growth cycle of its phase, growth phase of its cycle. And critical to getting market penetration and the driving adoption of the legislation will be to engage with the innovators and early adopters to drive demand. So to complete the final discovery phase, I'll now hand you over to Josh, who will take you through that.
Thank you, Grant. All right, make sure I got the right thing. I haven't got it held on backwards. Woo! Okay, just waking myself up. All right. Okay, I'm going to follow through the discovery. And so part of the government's procurement legislation, it aims to reduce the junk in buildings and also promote better building practices. So the first, this obviously impacts a number of different stakeholders. The first being builders, which offer probably the biggest challenge in terms of alignment with the higher order motives of the legislation. Secondly, we have the building inspectors, who will be early adopters and also probably one of the heaviest users of the digital registry. However, they lack the ability to influence adoption. Thirdly, we isolated vertically integrated. Now these guys have much similar alignment to the similar higher order motives and also have a reputation around the environment and society needs. The next we identified is the architects, who are very open to adopting new technology and also have similar higher order motives that are much more in line with the procurement legislation. And then finally, we identified the government, who are the gatekeepers of the legislation, and ultimately they're in control of the adoption of the digital registry. So taking that one step further, we did a bit of perceptual mapping to understand the relationship and the interaction between each stakeholder. So the first one here, we looked at price sensitivity versus compliance. And what we identified here is that there's a massive gap between the builders and the architects, as an example. And the builders are really trying to reduce costs and to win those tenders. The next perceptual map that we did, we looked at environment and the desire to meet society's expectations. So taking another look here, that same gap existed between the architect and a builder, for example. So what we identified through this process is that there's an opportunity to bridge that gap and focus on vertically integrated as they take in the need of the builder and the architect in one to try and simplify our target message. So I'm going to pass it over to Nancy now, and she's going to run you through some of the insights that we discovered along the way.
Thank you, Josh. Let's take a look at some insights that we discovered along the way. First, society is ready for change. We want to say no to all the junk buildings. And we're looking for the buildings which is good for the planet and good for the environment, which is sustainable. And everyone wants building with less junk. And we want more local jobs in Australia. Public wants transparency with government spendings. I mean, most of our groups found this one. And we will find that the transparency will link with the trust, will build up the trust. So when come here, we have to define the critical success factors for our case. First, engagement with relevant stakeholders through the high order objectives to create commitment to the legislation in a long-term run. Second, deploy a platform with a digital registry enable stakeholders to comply with the legislation in a commercial and timely manner. Third is address the needs from the public, which is efficiency building. The fourth is ensure the ongoing commercial viability and availability of digital registry solutions, which is capable of facilitate post-infection of the compliance. Now, when we go through all this journey, we come to the middle part of the double diamonds, which is define of the objectives, the problems. Now, from the problems, what is we found, and how might we ensure the rapid and cost-effective adoption of the government's procurement legislation. We go through this SWOT analysis to identify all the strengths, opportunities, and weakness and stress. And we're more keen on utilize the strengths and opportunities to build up more solutions. And then we go, and when we go through this TAO analysis to create these relationships between strengths and the opportunities, we found the relevant strategies, solutions for our problem. What we found our key objectives. First one is maintain and facilitate compliance with the procurement legislation by seeking buy-in from internal government procurement departments and vertical integrated construction business, which are tending for the government's business of government projects. The second one is engage with the end users, which is the public voters, to drive high level and long run support to encourage a good behavior, culture. Then we have to go through the consumer analysis. We have to identify through all these stakeholders, which are the key ones, the key players. We're using 100 points the scale systems, and we identify from 5 different aspects, which is alignment with the values of the procurement legislation. The second one is openness to the compliance. And the third one is openness to the change and using a digital registry system. The fourth one is financial incentive to adopt the digital registry and the procurement legislation. And the fifth one, which is the most important one, is ability to influence the other players in the same industry. So based on this analysis, and we found the first 3 key players. We will target with government procurement departments, and the second one is vertical integrated business, and the third one will be the public, which is the consumer. Based on that, what we found, we have to develop a solution which will targeting these three stakeholders rather than just the simple ones, because we believe as long as we do these 3 jobs, it will impact to create a better environment for this industry. First, we are going to spend about 20% of our energy and our resources to build up the awareness and build up over 90% awareness and over 80% of compliance in the government procurement departments. The second one and the third ones are internal ones. We are going to use the most of our resources, about 70%, to focus on the vertical integrated business, which we are going to make 100% awareness and about 80% of compliance within 180 days. Targeting with the vertical integrated business. And the third one, we will talk about the publics. And we're going to make about 40% awareness and around 25% of the public supporting with the objects of documented legislations. That's all for our solutions, but I will pass to Josh for all the implementation plan. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. I'm just going to click through a little bit here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I hope that's not my apartment. So, build-wise. So what we wanted to do is create a voice for the government. And basically we want to create a platform that enables the government to communicate and create a dialect with its key stakeholders. Now, the opportunity there is to create awareness, but also to connect with them on an emotional and cognitive level. Buildwise will also give the government the ability to create awareness and ultimately long-term commitment for change and alignment to the government's procurement legislation. So that's just a little bit of an overview about Buildwise. So taking a little bit of a deeper approach and looking into the strategy overarching, why? So it's about the planet, it's about the environment, and it's about the people. So it's about creating jobs, it's about the environment, etc. The why. How are we going to do it? By creating a community that rewards and promotes compliance and better building practices. How are we going to do this? What are we doing this through? We're doing it through the legislation, and we're doing it through the adoption of a digital registry. So as Nancy pointed out before, it's a 3-stage process. The first one being government procurement that we're going to target and get them on board. They're on the coalface, and we need them to adopt the digital registry. The second, as we identified before, was vertically integrated. Now these guys represent probably the biggest opportunity in terms of influence across the industry. And then third, and ultimately the tester, it's you and I, it's the voting public, who are going to get behind it and create, get part of that tribe and create commitment to change. And if we want long-term change, it's going to come down to the voting public. So I'm going to break that down a little bit more, get into stage one. What does that look like for implementation? So we're looking in the internal government. The first thing is a presentation deck, and that deck will provide a mission statement, an overview of BuildWise, and will also show how it links to the digital registry and how that enables the government's legislation. Secondly, there'll be a brand video that isolates and demonstrates the BuildWise mission and how that working with the digital registry can enable the legislation. Whew, a lot of words in there, sorry. Okay, and then most importantly, we've got digital registry workshops. So we want to work with the employers of the procurement agency and get them on board to make their jobs easier with this proposed digital registry. And finally, internally, we want to strategically post brochures and posters in key high traffic areas inside the government so that BuildWise is first of mind when they come to work, when they're getting a coffee, or even if they're on the toilet. I didn't put that in before. On the back thing. So stage two, we move on to the external businesses. External, so B2B. So we're connecting with vertically integrated. The first part of this is a PR strategy. So we're going to look to a media release that shows BuildWise's overarching mission statement and also alignment with one of the key industry partners from a vertically integrated partner. And then also within that, we'll provide the solution to the legislation in the form of a digital registry. Secondly, we're going to launch the BuildWise website. In order to communicate and connect with these different stakeholders, you need to be able to connect with them through, online. So, full 360 BuildWise platform. We then integrate, and this is the pull factor, we create the BuildWise Awards. So the BuildWise Awards celebrate excellence in compliance. And what we're doing is we're drawing in those stakeholders to make sure that they can get that tick of approval and that community can gather around. I've lost my thought there, but anyway, keep moving. And then with the BuildWise Awards, we're then going to go to trade shows and have a booth throughout Australia at all the key major trade shows. So you've got design shows, you've got the green building things, and basically BuildWise will have a set up booth there, we'll introduce the digital registry, and we'll integrate with the key stakeholders on a personal level to ensure that the mission is continued. Stage three, Wise Up, is the call out. So I'm going to keep going through because I always get stuck on that and then I'll come back to it. Wise Up. So Wise Up is a 360 digital campaign designed to bring focus back on and focus. It's a push strategy focusing on the builders and the people that aren't complying, that aren't playing by the rules, that are wasting taxpayers' money, and encourages them to wise up. And so with this, there's an online 360 digital support. We're going to do paid media. We're going to target high traffic areas. Punt Road, live down the road, high traffic area. But yeah, so Melbourne Central, etc. And then the third thing, and probably the most exciting, is partnering with the City of Melbourne. Now, the City of Melbourne is arguably the world's most livable city. And how good would that be to have Melbourne built wisely? So with that enough said, I'm going to hand it to Grant and he's going to wrap it up.
Thanks, Josh. We're coming to the end. What we can conclude, I think, from our assessment is that the successful outcomes of the environment, economic and social aspects of procurement legislation are dependent upon long-term commitment to the legislation, and secondly to the long-term availability of a digital registry solution that enables the adoption of that particular part. A recommended strategy is to focus 90% of the efforts on a mandate facilitate approach whereby we engage with those key influencers to initiate initial adoption and compliance of legislation, while concurrently focusing 10% of our efforts on building a total industry voluntary compliance with the spirit of the legislation. Once sufficient traction has been achieved with that particular campaign, then our recommendation is to switch that degree of focus to the alternative where 90% of the effort is placed on the long-term objective of total industry voluntary compliance. This will achieve much more significant economic, environmental and social outcomes than simply focusing on the government-funded construction. This can be achieved through the Buildwise marketing campaign that Josh has just taken us through, and that campaign has been designed to allow for that strategic transition of focus to the consumer-facing aspect to build that long-term commitment. Having said that, we'll open up for any questions.
Well done.
Yeah, similar to the last one, I think you can kind of grab a hold of this thing and start, putting it up to, internals and government. There's a pile of work there. I'm interested to know the costs. I've got a few different budgets going on, but that's all right. Well, I think the stakeholder adoption phase is...
Well, can I jump in on the cost? I think the fact that we were targeting the government, obviously we're going to break down into the cost a little bit more, but we took the example that they would probably have a little bit of a bigger budget based on the fact, I don't know if you want to help me out here, but because originally we were focusing on the digital registry, right? Which we had a limited budget, so we had to be a little bit more nimble on how we would apply it. But once you start to work for the government, you have access to a bigger budget. So if you look at WorkSafe, for an example, and the platform they've created and the way that they've connected it, there's similar things exist. So we've used a strategy that they implement and broken down the resources that they use to apply it to Buildwise. All right, there you go. So that helps.
Yeah, that's a good example of WorkSafe.
Yeah. So I think
you're actually taking a digital lab and then running with it.
Yeah.
I think your proposal is we're providing again a rebranded registry for them to use in there.
Yeah.
Almost. I think the proposal is that the government needs to ensure the adoption of this legislation. They can't do it without an enabling solution, and it can assist in the overall process by developing this campaign and encouraging the use of a digital registry, and to do it, it's using Buildwise as a campaign.
And funnily enough, the Wise, I think if you see the thread, the opportunity to be powered by ProductWise obviously lends itself to. So the door's open for the leading digital registry that you might have in your back pocket.
Funny that.
Sorry.
So great research. I like the graphics and the fact that you're actually facilitating government. So, bravo.
Cool.
Thanks for that. I thought you guys did a great job at just telling the story of what was actually shown there. So that was really excellent. Did you create that Buildwise logo thing as well? I know this is not the focus of the class, but just because I come from a design not background, I'm kind of living that world right now, but consumers kind of, when they recognize stuff, they go color, shape, image, and words.
Yeah.
So I think you've just done a really great job building a house.
Okay. Yeah, I almost put a roof on it. But
like you can kind of see how that can be really campaignable.
Yeah.
So again, I know this is not the focus of this, but like taking that little house and put that where you've got the hashtag Wise Up.
Yeah.
Wise building, wise protection, wise whatever. I think that can be really campaignable and something that can be really easily recognizable.
That's cool.
Great job.
Cool. Thank you.
Well done. I think, Grant, you did a fantastic job of telling the story through all the background to this. I think that was beautifully done, because what we saw on the slides was the detail and the steps, and you just kept the narration very clear as we went through that. And likewise, I think, thank goodness the finally we're over the flu. We get to hear Nancy come to life. So you did a fantastic job of taking us through the science, if you like, as to how you came up with this percentage breakdown of the three stakeholders that you've chosen. And that's sort of important, because that then showcases that there was a real method in terms of how you garnered this. I think, like the previous group, you had a very clear, strong story that was easy to follow throughout the entire presentation. And what you've chosen to do is a little bit more like the first group, is unpack it a little bit in terms of some of the work that went into that, in terms of how you came up with this, which was interesting. Josh, you great job of taking us through the campaign and the phases of the campaign, which is fabulous. And I think ultimately what you did is you validated the choices you made. As I already said, I think you come up with your own logo and you come up with the build-wise, it makes great sense. It's a great fit. So you're providing an example of what the campaign could look like. I love the way you went through the why, how and what, and then sort of fed that through into the campaign. To me it was a very cohesive story. What I loved again too, for each of you in the presentation, I mean Josh, you gave a great presentation last time anyway, and you're a bit of a showman and you're good. I think what we saw really stepping up here was enhancement in terms of, so we had a really strong team presenting, so I loved it. Well done.